Welcome to BBOC Live. It's 10:30 a.m. Eastern, and this is the Week 5 college football betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, are my fellow BBOC co-hosts, Colin Wilson, Mike Calabrese, and the one and only Mr. Brett McMurphy. We have a lot to get to today. We'll give our two best bets. As always, we'll talk two marquee matchups, including the big one tonight, Alabama, Georgia, and also Notre Dame, Louisville. Colin and I will put together a round robin underdog moneyline parlay, and we'll get Mr. Johnny Manziel's Hail Mary pick of the week. Before we do get started here, quick ad read. If you want access to all of Action's pro projections, make sure to sign up for our annual subscription that is currently on sale. Access includes exclusive player prop picks from Sean Kerner and other members of the Action Analytics team. You also get access to exclusive expert articles, our best spread moneyline and total bets, and real ticket and money percentages. To sign up, visit actionnetwork.com/pro today and use code BBOC20 at sign up. One more time, that's BBOC20 at sign up for $20 off. Gentlemen, another wild Friday night. I think we've had 5 straight Friday night games that have come down to the final play of the game. Catch or no catch in Miami, a game that had massive potential ACC and college football playoff implications. Brett, I'll start with you. Catch or no catch?
No catch, but the folks that voted on my Twitter poll, 65% say it was a catch. But yeah, no catch for me.
Maybe a lot of Miami hate in those results. I agree. I think that he never had control and it touched a Miami player. It was botched by the officials, though, how they handled that from start to finish. The announcements, I mean, it was a mess. You got to love ACC officials. Colin, catch or no catch?
Absolutely not a catch. Absolutely cannot overturn it, the original call. So it was just a circus from front to back.
Calabrese, catch or no catch?
Yeah, it wasn't a catch, but the bigger headline to me was Cam Ward turning back into a pumpkin before we turn the calendar to October. Lots of turnover-worthy plays, gave an underdog an opportunity. This is going to be the Miami roller coaster for the rest of the season. When he plays at a high level, they're a national title threat, and when he starts putting the ball on the turf and making some poor choices through the air, they could lose to just about any team with a pulse in the ACC, and that included Virginia Tech last night.
Yeah, that's kind of been the criticism on Cam Ward. It's extremely inconsistent. He'll have these games where he just looks lost, and credit to Virginia Tech for forcing him into a lot of those mistakes, but some of them were just head-scratching plays. And Colin, condolences to you. I hope your Saturday goes better than Washington, who just shot themselves in the foot over and over and over again last night against Rutgers.
And Gabe Gross told me before the national title game last January that he had hit field goals much longer than what he attempted last night. So that was so painful for somebody that not only had Washington and 500 yards of offense, but I had an over and 21-21 going to overtime. It was going to hit. So that was a painful about 3 minutes worth of college football last night.
Yep. A lot of the times that's what this just comes down to. You just try to get the best number and then hope for red zone breaks, turnover breaks, and then hope that the team that you bet on after they block a field goal, one of the kids in the sidelines doesn't run onto the field, resulting in a touchdown. So sometimes that's just the way the cookie crumbles. Long flight home for Mr. Gross after missing 3 field goals. But let's get into our first best bets. I will kick things off. Oh, full transparency, went 0-2 last week. So if you want to fade away, feel free to do so. It's my first 0-2 best bets in a long time, but so maybe that's starting a streak. But I like Georgia. I like the Bulldogs here. We will talk about that game later. So I will share all of my thoughts when we break down the marquee matchup. Colin, I'll throw it to you. What's your best bet?
I expect you to tweet today when you have a 17-0 lead in one of your bets. Because it's been, it's just the variance has been bad. I hate this pick, but I got to take it. It's Auburn on the money line going up against Oklahoma. It's an Auburn team that is just so mistake prone and dominated the game last week against Arkansas. A 94% post-game win expectancy. They lost that game. It was just sloppy all around, but they are going back to quarterback Peyton Thorne, who has a deeper arm, a 13 yards for an average depth of target. And really the story here is that Oklahoma is just completely injury filled. Wide receivers specifically, Nick Anderson is not going to play. Angelo Anthony not expected to play. Deion Burks questionable. There are more names than that are out on this list. We don't have enough time on this show to talk about it. And that's really bad for a freshman quarterback making his first start in Michael Hawkins Jr. This is already an OU offense that is 121st in offensive finishing drives. They just cannot get points on the board when they get into scoring position. And like I said, Peyton Thorne returns for Auburn. This OU secondary is outside the top 75 in coverage and giving up pass explosives. We did see Tennessee break a couple of them off that made the difference in the cover last week. And when you look at what Auburn does, they are best, and they go to work when they are throwing the ball. Keandre Lambert-Smith, 3-point yards per route run. That is extremely explosive. And you got to think there's going to be regression coming for Auburn at some point. Right now, there's only two teams with a worse net turnover than Auburn, and that's La Tech and Temple. Auburn's had 14 turnovers. They're minus 10 on the season. I mean, we're on a pace for what, 70? It's just not sustainable what's going on with Auburn football. We will back them. We will go against a heavily injured Oklahoma team that comes to town.
Yeah, I like this as well. Look, I mean, first start on the road for a young quarterback without your top 5 receivers and an offense that can't run the ball, with an offensive line that's just struggling and injured. And I mean, maybe his legs, I think, will help because of that, but there's only so much you can do. But you nailed it. Auburn, stop turning the ball over. I mean, man, it's like every drive they turn it over. So we'll see if they can avoid the turnover bug today. Brett, where are you going?
Sorry for the delay. I was massaging my shoulder after patting my back after correctly picking Oklahoma would not beat Tennessee last week. You guys finally have seen the light. I'll go to the Big 12, BYU and Baylor. Look, as much as I'm still celebrating that win, BYU still celebrating last week's win against Kansas State. They're still chugging chocolate milk in Provo. But Kansas State dominated BYU. They outgained them by over 125 yards. They gave up a defensive touchdown, a 90-yard punt return. Baylor has Sawyer Robertson at quarterback. I think that gives them a spark. A lot better offensively with him than DeQuan Finn. The bad news is Baylor has lost 7 consecutive home games against Big 12 opponents. This is a huge, huge game for Dave Aranda's future. I think they bounce back. If not, Baylor fans, Chip and Joanne can do a fixer-upper on his next house because it will not be in Waco.
Yeah, I like this one. I do think Aranda's fixed the defense. The defense has played very well. BYU still can't run the ball. I like the way the back end of that Baylor defense is playing, but you're right. It's a huge game for Aranda and Baylor. Calabrese, where you headed?
I'm treating myself here in week 5, fading my favorite coach to fade, and that's Trent Dilfer. I'm going to lay the points. This number is on the move. I play it all the way up to the midshipman, laying 6. You look at last year's matchup. PJ Volker, the defensive coordinator for Navy, put this UAB offense in a complete box. They beat him 31-6. It was the only time the entire season that the Blazers failed to score 20 or more points, and he really did it by squeezing Jacob Zeno, the check down merchant. All of his short throws, he walked everybody up into the box and said, please beat us over the top. He couldn't do it. He threw for 206 yards, 2 picks, 0 touchdowns. He's having a rough year this year because the playbook on how to beat him is out there. And on the other side of the ball, Drew Cronick comes in at offensive coordinator for Navy, and everything that he's sprinkled in from a wing T perspective on top of what they've done with the triple option offense has really unlocked everything aerially for Navy. At this point, they're hitting 3 plays of 40+ yards or more per game. That's the most in the entire country. So this isn't a dink and dunk, bleed you out kind of offense anymore. They can throw haymakers. They have the opportunity to do it with Blake Horvath, who, by the way, leads the nation in QBR. The Navy quarterback leads the nation in QBR. This offense is hot. They just torpedoed Memphis, basically knocking them out of the college football playoff race, dropped 56 points, 566 yards. Navy is just about as hot as any team in the entire country. And if they were a separate team, if they were a public team, you would see a huge swing in this point spread. But I still think the public is slow to adapt to a really dynamic service academy. So I'm going to go ahead, like I said, lay the 4.5 here. I'd lay it up to 6.
Yeah, I actually disagree with this one. One of us will be right, but Navy just might be that good. They still have issues on defense. I mean, their defense is not that good. And it does help that they played, who did they play the first 2 weeks? Temple and Bucknell. But I will say that you incorporate the Delaware wing T to, what they already had. And that offense does look dynamic. So I just might not have caught up to their numbers. It also isn't a great spot. You come off now, Service Academy's usually immune to spots, but they're coming off that huge emotional win. You do have Air Force on deck. UAB has had a bye, and these teams will start to get film on what Navy is doing. They've had 2 weeks to prepare for a unique offense, so that does help. But you might be right. Navy just might be so much better than any of the priors.
I will say one more thing, Stuck. In terms of UAB, yes, they have the extra prep time, which can be helpful, but they're second to last in PFF run defense and 111th in tackling per the same metric. So you got to get yourself lined up. They've struggled with that. And then making tackles in the open field, that's what the wing T brings to the table. It's putting people in space and creating those one-on-one matchups. And it seems like Navy just keeps winning them.
All right, good stuff there. Let's get to the first marquee matchup of the day, and it's a big one tonight between Alabama and Georgia in Tuscaloosa. Georgia putting their insane regular season winning streak, road winning streak, SEC winning streak, all on the line. Of course, they did lose in the SEC championship last year to this Alabama team. Alabama looks like they're going to close as a home dog for the first time since 2007. That's also the last year that Georgia played in Tuscaloosa with fans in the stands. They also did it in 2020 with a reduced crowd. But before we share our thoughts, spoke with Johnny Manziel earlier this week to get his quick thoughts. And this is actually the first time that Georgia will play, surprisingly, at Alabama in front of fans since 2007 as well. They did play in 2020, but obviously was not a full crowd. Johnny, who do you like here in this SEC showdown?
This is a really tough game. One I think is obviously going to be an absolute battle of the trenches. I'm going to take the home team in Alabama on the money line against Georgia. Georgia just didn't look great against Kentucky. Obviously, both of them getting idle weeks this week to have a bye and be able to prepare for this game. I just like Jalen Milroe and the way that he's playing football right now and his ability to run the football and be a dual threat guy. I think obviously their downfield passing attack has been great. They're going up against the best defense that they've seen all this year in Georgia. But this is going to be a game that comes down to limiting turnovers. Turnover, battle is going to be a huge thing, and really making sure that there's no mistakes. And I think this is a game that Alabama will get that cleaned up, and it'll be a very close game, but one I think they'll sneak out and win.
All right, thanks, Johnny. I disagree with Mr. Manziel, and I think with a few of my co-hosts will share their thoughts in a bit. I already mentioned I like Georgia in this game. Look, they have the most impressive data point by far. People are forgetting because they didn't look that impressive at Kentucky, who, by the way, is a top 20 defense. They faced another top 20 defense in Clemson and demolished them to start the year. Clemson since is absolutely destroying anybody that they play, and their offense looks like a juggernaut. Georgia completely shut them down, should be healthier this week. And this is a Kirby smash spot. I mean, off of a bye, he is the most successful coach against the spread in college football history against ranked teams. 67% as a favorite in that spot as well. All the motivation in the world. You didn't look great against Kentucky. You lost last year in the SEC championship game to prevent you from a college football playoff appearance and a potential national championship. And you had Alabama players chirping a bit. I mean, the master motivator, Kirby Smart, has 2 weeks prepared. Team gets healthier. And I'm not buying this Alabama offensive line still. I know Proctor helps at left tackle, but getting mauled by South Florida for the entire game. I know there was injuries, but you still have weak areas on that offensive line. And then the secondary, the corners are not good right now. The numbers won't show it because South Florida couldn't hit a wide open guy. Western Kentucky couldn't hit a wide open guy. And Van Dyke gets hurt on the first drive of the game. And you got to play Locke, who you might as well have Calabrese out there trying to sling it around. So I think that Beck won't miss open guys. Georgia's healthier defensive line will take advantage of this Alabama offensive line. They'll have a good game plan, be completely motivated. It'll be tough, but I think Georgia gets it done. Colin, you disagree?
Yeah, I'm going the opposite way. I'm going at Alabama. I love this number better at 2.5, but we'll go ahead here with the one that's on the board. And really, this is such a tough matchup because you have like the greatest defensive mind in the game as a head coach going up against what we think is the greatest offensive mind in the game with Alabama. now Kalen DeBoer, head coach of Alabama. But the trench favors Alabama on both sides of the ball. The return of Caden Proctor on that offensive line for Alabama increased Alabama's success rate rushing up to 59% against Wisconsin. We can say all we want about this strength of schedule and the Wisconsin defensive line, but there was a massive turn in success rate for Alabama on the ground once they got Caden Proctor back. But if you look at Georgia's offensive line, All-American Tate Ratledge is out for Georgia. Now, his backup did just fine in pass blocking, not so good in run blocking. So you have to watch out for that. And if you look at Georgia right now on the offensive line, they're outside the top 60 in all rushing metrics that you can name. That Trevor Etienne is doing all the work here, averaging more than 3.5 yards after contact. And then you have to look at how are they going to defend Carson Beck. And when you look at Georgia, what they're going to do, because Brock Bowers is not there, Beck is really kind of searched for who his go-to guy is. Well, his top target guy is Dominic Lovett. Dominic Lovett lines up in the slot. He has the most targets on this team. He's highly explosive. That plays right into the hands of what Alabama's strength is, which is slot coverage. If you go and look at if you dump out PFF's top 200 individual players of anyone that's covered the slot more than 40 snaps, Alabama has 3 defenders in that top 200 of all teams in college football. Georgia doesn't have any. So there is a huge boost here for Alabama when it comes to Malachi Moore and the people that are going to defend Dominic Lovett in the slot. Now, you mentioned injuries and that the defensive interior is going to get better for Georgia here on the line. I disagree. I mean, we know Hall isn't going to play. Brinson will be back, but he hasn't played. There's 3 snaps against Clemson. But the big one is Mykel Williams. And I think this is what you and I talked about on the podcast. Yes, he is a game time decision today. But at the same time, if you read the practice reports, all he's done is light practicing on his pass rush. There's no word out there that he's going to be able to defend the run whatsoever. You're going to take Jalen Milroe and a hobbled Mykel Williams that has to do something other than he has to do lateral moves instead of just a pass rush against Jalen Milroe and his legs. I don't think Williams is going to be full speed, even on a pass rush, and he's surely not going to be able to defend the rush. So the trench completely favors Alabama here. Carson Beck's favorite spot is the slot. Alabama defends that better than anybody. And when your best defensive player can't go lateral left or right, that's really bad news against Jalen Milroe. So I'm going to take Alabama here. Roll Tide.
I mean, look, I get what you're saying about the slot, but if there's wide open guys running down the field, like there was in Alabama's first 2 games against bad teams, his favorite place to throw is not going to be in the slot. And I don't think Beck's going to miss them. I get the Proctor thing. It does help, but he's one guy. I mean, was he going to block the entire Georgia defensive line?
He's big enough.
And the Wisconsin defensive line is atrocious. And yeah, the Georgia rush numbers aren't great, but they have a bunch of backups playing in the first game. And they've played 2 of the best defensive lines in the NFL, in college football. But you make some good points. It'll be, I can see cases for both teams. We'll learn a lot about both, but I do have more trust in what I've seen from Georgia against really good teams so far. Brett, you agree with Colin?
Yeah, first I'd like to congratulate Colin for setting a new BBOC record for longest explanation of a pick, breaking the previous record of Colin. But
Wilson.
Anyway, I digress. Look, you guys broke it down perfectly. One thing you didn't bring up, Stuck, DeBoer 12-2 straight up versus top 25 ranked opponents, 10-3-1 ATS. Also, something you guys haven't touched on, I think all the pressure's on Georgia. They're the favorite. Everyone's expecting them to bounce back. Alabama knows they can beat Georgia. Is there any little doubt in Georgia's mind when they face Alabama when things go wrong? That's what I'm counting on. I think Alabama in the home crowd is enough. I think it'll be Roll Tide. Let's see.
Calabrese?
Well, first, I appreciate, Stuck, that you gave a shout out to my potential as a college quarterback. I did win a flag football championship with famed producer Matt Mitchell at Mizzou, so I can sling the rock a little bit.
Penn State, I think I heard, is looking for a quarterback, so maybe their whole tryouts.
Yeah, maybe I can step in here. I'm going to go with a double result in this game, with Alabama leading in the first half going into the locker room and Georgia coming back to win the game. I've seen it at 7, 8-1 out in the market. And the reason for this is the slow starts under Mike Bobo calling the plays and Beck as his quarterback. They scored 10 or less against South Carolina, Auburn, Mizzou, Bama last year in the SEC title game, and that's persisted into this season. The Clemson and Kentucky games as well, they struggled in the first half. So I think even with an extra week to prepare, and it's key to remember, both teams got that extra week to prepare. I think there's going to be a feeling out period, and Georgia, at least everything I've seen with Mike Bobo calling the plays, he goes a little bit conservative in these big moments. 4 of the 6 Kirby versus Alabama games have featured a second half comeback, and that's one of the reasons why I think there's way too much value in a prop bet like this. I think these teams are very evenly matched. I don't think one is going to run away with this game in the first half. So to have that much value, say it's a 1-possession game at halftime, and I get that Alabama lead, I have some good edge potential in the second half.
Don't hate it. Good luck to you there, and I hope. Well, as someone who bet Georgia, I don't hope Bama's up at the first half. But if they are, I hope that you cash, because that would mean Georgia.
Clemson covered the first half. You look at that final score; it's hard to believe, but Georgia just kind of lifeless the first half.
Yep. All right, let's move on to our round robin underdog moneyline parlay. Colin, will we start with an anchor? Where are we going this week?
Yeah, let's go ahead and start off with Baylor going up against BYU. BYU coming off that home victory, like Brett said, with the chocolate milk and the secret lives of the Mormon wives is probably one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. But we're going to go with Baylor here. The defense is playing too well, especially against the pass, and that's all that they are. That's all BYU is. Jake Retzlaff throwing it deep. So Baylor's got the defense to handle that at home. They're going to start us off with an anchor here.
The secret what?
Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. It is a great show on Hulu. Go watch it. It's crazy.
What is it about? Well, I guess it makes the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives kind of self-explanatory. All right, I will have to look into it. I'm going against Calabrese here. I'm going with UAB. I make this number smaller. It's a bad spot for Navy. I also don't think the number really matters here. I mean, it does, but yeah, 3.5, 4. The chances of this landing between 1 and 3 is lower than a normal game because Navy's going to go for it on 4th downs. Navy doesn't have a kicker. So now that I said that, I mean, Navy's going to win by 3, but I think that there's a path to success for UAB here through the air. Hopefully they made adjustments from what they did last year, as Calabrese alluded to, but give me the Blazers.
Yeah, next we're going to go with UNLV. Calabrese and I cut a Mountain West podcast back in July, and I said I love the quarterback depth at UNLV. Sluka, he's done his work. They're 3-0. That's great. All the news that's happened this week that's transpired. What I thought when that number dipped, I thought, why are we dipping this number on Haj Malik Williams, who's thrown for 6,300 yards at Campbell? It was just lit up a couple of Power 5 opponents back in 2021. So I have all the faith in the world that UNLV does not have a drop at the quarterback position. Let's take UNLV the running Rebs today.
And I'm going to go with USF. I'm agreeing with Calabrese. He's going to talk about this game later. Even teams here to me, and I'll take the better quarterback. And USF's looked better than their results. They hung with Alabama for 3 quarters. They hung with Miami for 3 quarters. They were just out-athleted and talented. So, and they go so fast. Their D just wore down at the end. But give me the Bulls here to get it done on the road. I'm still not a Byron Mensah yet. He had that one good game against Kansas State. He's going to come crashing back down to earth. Close this up.
Yeah, let's go to the Big 12. Let's take TCU going up against Kansas. Fading Kansas has just been an ATM machine so far this year, but TCU is 60% pass. When you look at KU, they're outside the top 100 and creating contested catches. That's going to be bad against a very heavy pass Frogs offense. So TCU here, wrap us up.
I mean, you want to talk about how important Andy Kotelnicki is. Look no further than what's happened to the Kansas offense. Doesn't help that Daniels has been able to read a defense, but that offense just isn't as crisp. The sequencing and play calling isn't as good. And then you look at Penn State's offense, which is much improved. They really do miss him. All right, so that'll do it for the round robin. Baylor, UAB, UNLV, USF, and TCU. Let's get that home this weekend. Feel good about it. All right, let's go to our second marquee game of the day between Notre Dame and Louisville. Notre Dame sitting at around a 6.5-ish. I think it like touches 7 briefly, comes back down. Point favorite at home, looking for revenge against Louisville. Took it to them last year. Notre Dame's been a bit of Jekyll and Hyde this year. Tough team to crack. I think the only way to look here is the under. I know that Louisville might get one of their key receivers back. We'll see if Lacey can go. They are missing their top corner, which is big because their secondary has issues. But Notre Dame can't really throw the ball. They want to run it. That's the strength of Louisville's defense. And, when you look at Notre Dame, the strength of their defense, they have a really good defense all around, but they have a really good secondary. Louisville I don't expect them to be able to run it here, so they're going to try to throw it. that's right into the teeth of the Notre Dame defense. So, yeah, I think the only way to look here is the under. I would like Louisville, but I haven't been that like their first two games were against nobodies, and last week they just were pretty lucky against Georgia Tech, had a bunch of fluke plays. So I I just can't buy into them enough yet at this number. Colin, you agree on the underlook?
100%. I like the under better than I like Louisville for a couple of reasons here. Now, first off, let's talk about under and weather. There is some weather here. There's a 20% chance of precip. There's going to be sustained winds over 10 miles per hour. That should have an effect on special teams kicking and then the passing of Riley Leonard, which has been non-existent. These are two very slow-paced offenses. Louisville averages 32 seconds per play. I believe that might be dead last in the nation, and Notre Dame's no rabbit either, 28.4 seconds per play. And then what we talked about, why do I not want to play Louisville here? Because Tyler Shook struggles with pressure. They've allowed 22 pressures against the defenses of Georgia Tech, Jacksonville State, and Austin Peay. This Notre Dame defense is going to be able to get pressure, and Tyler Shook's numbers completely fall through the floor whenever he gets anybody in his face. Go to the other side with Riley Leonard. I do not know what has happened to Riley Leonard. The version we saw at Duke is not the version we have at Notre Dame. Right now, he is 106th in on-target rate. He cannot hit a target in stride. And he can't throw with pressure. His number goes from 70% completion rate down to 30% completion rate when he has pressure. Under all the way here.
Yeah, it's troubling that they weren't able to just throw it more successfully last week against Georgia Tech, a secondary that I don't value highly. And you're right, I think the offensive line has taken a step back. Brett and Calabrese have no feel in this game, so they're just here for the aesthetic. They're pretty faces. So let's move on to our final best bet of the day. I'll kick things off. I'm going to go with Mac Dog. Let's get Western Michigan at Marshall. I think this is a great spot for Western Michigan, who is coming off a bye, which means they could get a number of key offensive players back. Trying to get Mac info is very difficult. Shout out Alex K. Thanks for nothing. But look, Western Michigan could get healthier coming off a bye. I like this team coming into the year. They played at Wisconsin, very tough, a full-strength Wisconsin team. Had a bad bounce on a punt late, but this team has some more juice on defense. Offense, super experienced, one of the most experienced teams in the country. Marshall, meanwhile, you're coming off two tough road games, physical road games against Virginia Tech and Ohio State. And on deck, now you come in for a MAC team, and on deck you have 3 conference games in 12 days. So like preparation-wise, rest-wise, it all favors Western Michigan. I think this is one of the better situational spots on the board. So give me the boys from Kalamazoo. Colin, where are you going?
Love it. I mean, when you ask if head coaches even prepare for teams sometimes, I don't think Charles Huff is preparing for this one at all. I'm going to go to the Big 12. I love Oklahoma State at the number of 6 here, going up against a Kansas State team that has a lot of flaws here. First off, they have no downfield passing whatsoever with Avery Johnson. He's 3 of 15 on passes over 20 yards this year. They're bottom 15 nationally in creating pass explosives. So the Kansas State offense does not have a lot of bite through the air. And the Oklahoma State defense has just been elite when opponents are trying to score. In 27 opponent drives against the Pokes that have crossed the 40-yard line, the Pokes are allowing 1.7 points per trip. That is one of the best in the nation. And you look at their red zone numbers down past the 20, they're top 15 in red zone defense. The Kansas State defense is just struggling in 2 main areas that are really going to hurt today. 1, they can't produce a pass rush. And 2, their secondary numbers are pretty horrific. So defensive coordinator Joe Klanderman, his defense is 68th in creating contested catches. That's not a good look against Alan Bowman, who severely struggled against cover 1 last week. He's not going to see cover 1. The Utah defense, the cover 1, he's not going to see that against Kansas State. And then all Mike Gundy has talked about is how every team is loading the box with a 6-3-2 against Ollie Gordon. Well, that is something that Kansas State does like 7% of the time, but mostly they have a 3-man front. So if they're going to load the box and try to stop Ollie, they're going to leave themselves open at already their most vulnerable place, which is in the secondary. So I like Oklahoma State here, +6.
The only thing I worry about is just the Oklahoma State defense being gassed. They were on the field for 40+ minutes last week. Utah just ran it down their throats. Kansas State, I think, is going to take a run-heavy approach. Like, does that defense just wear down?
Overtime with Arkansas. Overtime with Arkansas. That's a lot.
Yeah. So I'm a bit worried about the fatigue there with Brett's Pokes. Brett, where are you going?
Hope you're right, Colin. I don't think you are, but I hope you're right. I am another Big 12 matchup, my home conference. UCF and Colorado. Colorado, one of the Worst rush defenses in the Big 12, UCF, the nation's top running attack with RJ Harvey and Penny Boone. Remember last year, Colorado coming off an emotional overtime win against Colorado State. They were getting 3 touchdowns against Oregon. Oregon smashed them 42-6. Guess what? Colorado coming off an emotional overtime win against Baylor. There are only 2 touchdown underdogs here. UCF has had this game circled for, I don't know, 365 days. This is a huge game for them. Big noon kickoff is there. It is humid. That's going to impact Colorado. UCF bounces the Buffs in the bounce house. I know everyone talks about Colorado's ability to get the backdoor cover. Like Oregon, it's going to be so far out of reach. The backdoor will be completely shut. I like UCF in a big time route as the Gus bus rolls over Dion.
Yeah, it is a great spot here coming off of a bye. You know, Colorado coming off of an emotional win, traveling across the country, heat, humidity. We'll see if Sanders can make enough plays because the UCF defense does have some questions in the secondary, especially. They're relying on I think a UAB transfer, an ETSU transfer, an ECU transfer. So Colorado could have some success in the air, but there's probably going to be too many negative plays, sacks, and it's just hard to see this Colorado team getting many stops and getting UCF into many third and long situations. Calabrese, I alluded to this pick earlier. You're rolling with the aforementioned Bulls.
We seem to just have like a mind meld this week because I almost went with Western as my second best bet. And just one added note on that. Charles Huff, since taking over in Huntington, 4-10 as a home favorite, one of the worst performers against the spread in all of college football since 2021. But in this spot, I'm taking the Bulls plus 170 on the money line. Let's not bury USF for fading in the second half against Alabama and Miami. By the end of the season, those teams could both be in the college football playoff. The athleticism, their ability to disrupt them on the perimeter in terms of getting them off their timing in that veer and shoot offense with the receivers near the sideline. That's not going to be the case against a Tulane defense whose performances are aging like milk here in the early going of September. They give up 34 to Oklahoma, who then goes ahead and benches their quarterback. Jackson Arnold has not been able to handle pressure at all, and that's why he's no longer the QB1 in Norman. And then K-State, they also give up 34 points to an offense that looked totally dysfunctional last week against BYU. So in terms of taking advantage of what they do, a big part of it is the fundamentals for the Tulane defense just aren't there. They're 128th in team tackling per PFF. And when you get into the red zone, you get a score. They've had 13 FBS drives that have gone into their red zone. They've given up 13 scores. So I think that's the big differentiator here for the Bulls. It's getting into that scoring opportunity and putting points on the board. And finally, Byron Brown. Yes, he's gone through the gauntlet here in the month of September, but AAC play is where he gets right. When you look at what he did last year, he led the conference in conference play in passing yards and total touchdowns. I think he gets right in this spot, and they get the train back on the tracks to potentially win an AAC title this season.
Yeah, and if you look last week against Louisiana outplayed Tulane in that game. Yards per play, they had, I think, 75 more total yards. They did whatever they wanted. Tulane just got a kick return for a touchdown and a pick six and a couple fourth down stops, and then Louisiana dropped a couple picks. And they still gave up 33 in that game. So this Tulane defense, they don't really have an edge rush. The offensive line for Tulane still isn't great. Mensa had that really good game against Kansas State, but it's been shaky since, so I like this one. All right, before we get out of here, one final task, and that is Mr. Manziel's Hail Mary pick of the week. Started off with a bang with Vanderbilt. Have given most of that back, but I've liked a lot of your picks. Tulane was in the game. Georgia Tech, I think, played Louisville pretty close. There was a blocked field goal that really swung that game. But I thought that they played competitively, and you play that game a number of times. Georgia Tech might come out ahead if they had a few different breaks go their way. Johnny, who are you looking toward this weekend?
I'm looking towards Louisville going into Notre Dame. Obviously, I like Tyler Shook, the way he's playing. I think Ryan Braun will have this team really ready to go. And this is going to be a battle that they're going to have to win in the trenches. I think they're going to have to be able to run the football effectively. They're going to have to use play action to be able to push the ball down the field a little bit, but one that I think they have every capability and capacity to be able to go out and get a good road win.
Yeah, the good thing for Louisville here is Notre Dame the passing attack's been non-existent, and Louisville's front and their run defense, that's the strength of that defense. Some questions in the secondary, but not sure Notre Dame can really take advantage. So Johnny's rolling with Louisville this weekend up in South Bend. All right, thanks, Johnny. And that'll do it for us. By the way, if you're watching YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Not enough of you hit like. Do appreciate that. Help us grow the channel. If you're watching on the app, thank you. But thank you to Colin, Mike, Brett. Thanks to our producers in the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. We will be back same time next week, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. You also have the recap show out Monday morning. So don't forget about the voicemails. Call and yell at me for all my awful picks. 959 bad beat. Group of 5 guys, Mike and Mike, will be back midweek with the Group of 5 preview. Colin and I will be back on Thursday with the Week 6 college football betting preview. New BCS will be out early next week on Tuesday. So just make sure you subscribe to our channel, subscribe to our podcast, Big Bets on Campus, wherever you listen to podcasts. One final reminder, if you want access to all of Action's Pro projections, make sure to sign up for our annual subscription that is currently on sale. Access includes exclusive player prop picks from Sean Kerner and other members of the Action Analytics team. You also get access to exclusive expert articles, our best spread, money line and total bets, and real ticket and money percentages. To sign up, visit actionnetwork.com/pro today and use code BBOC20 at sign up. One more time, that's BBOC20 at sign up for $20 off. Thanks again for tuning in. Good luck on all of your wagers today, and we will see y'all next Saturday. Cheers.